So what are the 5 strategies that I use to learn how to speak Portuguese? Learning how to speak Portuguese is an amazing and fascinating journey. I fell in love with the language a couple of years ago and got serious about learning the language. And 2 years down the line, I can speak it just fine. I have an intermediate level. And traveling to Brazil, I'm able to express myself to other people, have conversations, and have great interactions. So how did I do that in 2 years or less? And I believe it's possible in much less time if you are very dedicated. So the very first thing that I recommend you do is hire a tutor. So there is a ton of information online about how to learn languages, about learning Portuguese. There are innumerable number of applications you can download and practice. When I started, I quickly realized there was too much material for me to sort through, and I'm not smart enough, quite frankly, to come up with my own strategy and how I was going to organize it. And I knew that there was people out there who did this for a living, who teach how to learn a language for a living. So that's what I did. I did 3 classes a week, each for 1 hour, and I did that for 9 months before I took my first trip to Rio de Janeiro. And in between those classes, I studied for 1 hour every day. Now, I would count podcasts, for example, as studying time, or workbook time as studying time, or if I had a conversation with somebody virtually, I counted that as studying time as well. But if you want to make progress with Portuguese, you really need to stick to it. And an application by itself is not going to do you any service. Pro tip on hiring a tutor: there are many applications now. The one I use is Preply, where you can hire tutors in the country in which you are trying to learn the language. So in this case, I hired a tutor who is in the city that I was going to. You may want to consider that too. Perhaps there's an accent and you want to get accustomed to that accent. Well, you can certainly go and find a tutor from that city so you are accustomed to learning that accent. And Brazil is much like the US. It's a huge country. There's accents, very different accents, depending on if you're in the north, Fortaleza, or if you're in Rio, Carioca. These people speak with heavy accents that make it more difficult to learn the language. Also, a benefit now is you can hire the person in that country, for example, in Brazil, and they are in Brazil. So you are paying them in dollars and they are being paid in reais, the currency of Brazil. And that exchange rate now is almost 6-to-1, about 5.5-to-1. So each one of my lessons now, for example, it's a 50 minutes to an hour class, is $8. So I spend less than $60, roughly $60 a month, to do 2 virtual 1-hour classes every week. And that is how I maintain my level of Portuguese, if not increase it, while I am not in Brazil. So the first thing I recommend you do is hire someone who knows what they're doing, already knows what they're doing, and play around with it a little bit. Talk to 2 or 3 different tutors, do some introductory sessions, kind of like therapy, and figure out which one you jive the best with, and then start your learning process. But Portuguese is more difficult to learn than Spanish. It's certainly not as difficult to learn as the Asian languages, for example. It is very doable, but in my opinion, the first thing you should do is hire a tutor. Number 2, change the map direction on your phone app, so that every time you're in your car getting directions to somewhere, you're getting the same basic language and directions over and over and over and over again. For example, vire à direita, turn right. Vire à esquerda, turn left. Siga para a rota, continue on the route. Fique nas 2 pistas, stay in the middle 2 lanes. You will hear these phrases over and over again. Na placa de pare, the stop sign. Vire à direita. You will hear them so many times, thousands of times, that it will be these basic words that help you will get programmed in your mind, and you will learn them very quickly. And so I've also heard that you could change your whole phone language to Portuguese. I wasn't really wanting to do that because I didn't want to read all my emails in Portuguese for work and whatnot. So for me, it was sufficient just to change my map app. But to this day, when someone gets in the car with me for the first time and they hear Portuguese coming through the navigation app, the second question is, oh, what language is that? And it's it's interesting, right? It's very interesting. Number 3, also in the car, low-hanging fruit. Instead of listening to your Drake Spotify playlist, instead switch it up to some sort of Portuguese podcast. The more you listen over time as your skills increase, the more you will learn, the more it will make sense, and the more progress you will have, especially if you are learning the language outside Brazil, in the US, and you are living in a place where it's very difficult to find Brazilians to talk with in person. Any way that you can increase your listening minutes per day is going to help you. So an easy low-hanging fruit, instead of listening to that Drake playlist, listen to a Portuguese podcast. You go to Spotify, just type in Brazilian Portuguese. There are many, many options for you to choose from. They range from very beginner. Some of them are going to just teach you slang phrases, gírias, which are super fun in Portuguese, by the way. Always learn those fun phrases in addition to the grammar. Kind of the more boring stuff, the grammars, as regras gramáticas, the grammar rules, because they are different in Portuguese. How you construct a sentence in Portuguese is different than how you do it in English. So you have to learn these rules. And you can tell that this is true because if you spend any time in Brazil, you've likely met a expat who's lived there for several years who doesn't speak a word of the language. So this idea that you can move somewhere and just automatically learn the language through osmosis it's just not true. It's BS. You have to learn the structure and the vocabulary and the rules of the language and expand your vocabulary as you are basically immersing yourself in your culture. And one interesting thing I noticed is when I was in Brazil, when I stopped my classes, I could feel my abilities kind of decreasing a little bit, even though I was immersed in the culture, because I didn't have that other piece where I was talking with my tutor for an hour straight, talking about the rules, bringing up questions that I was encountering. So I would recommend, even when you are in Brazil, that you continue to do your classes. And maybe if you selected a tutor from the city you're going to, you can meet him in person. How fun is that? I've done that twice. You go and you meet the person that you've been talking to for all these months, who's been helping you learn the language and who's going to bring you along this journey. And then you meet them for a coffee or lunch or something like that. And it's really a cool experience. I highly recommend that. Number 4, in terms of apps, there is a fantastic app as you get a little more advanced, or even at the beginning, called Tandem. There's probably other apps just like this. However, Tandem, it's a free app. There is a paid version, but you can listen in on conversations on basically any language in the world. And sure enough, there is Portuguese, Brazilian speaking Portuguese. So if you have an extra 30 minutes to an hour, or however much time, download the app, go in, find they're called language parties, and you can go in and you don't have to talk. You can just listen. And you will be listening to Brazilians speaking in Portuguese from all over Brazil. So you will hear all sorts of accents, all sorts of interesting topics. And as you get more confident, you can start to participate. You can start to participate in these conversations, and your confidence in the language will grow exponentially at that point when you realize, wow, these people can really understand me. I can understand at least some of what they're saying. Certainly at the beginning, it's going to be very small what you understand. And as time goes on, you're going to start to understand more and more and more and more and more until you're able to get the gist of the conversation, the theme. Even today, I don't understand 100% of it. Depending on the person, I may only understand 50% of it after 2 years of studying. It depends on the person who's talking, how much slang they're using, how fast they're talking. Some people, I can understand everything they say. But the point is there are really great applications, technical applications now, to help you. I've seen people get fluent in Portuguese who are speaking on YouTube. They've never set foot in Brazil. I don't recommend that because I don't see the point in learning Portuguese if you're never going to go to Brazil. That's kind of the goal, is to go there and experience the culture. But it's possible, and that just goes to show how amazing the technology is and how connected the world is digitally. You can definitely strike up conversations with people all over Brazil through Tandem. Highly recommend it. There's probably others. That's the one that I use. And the final tip, dica número 5, keep a journal. You probably won't be able to do this until you are a little bit more advanced, but I don't think there's a too early time to start. So I try and write in my 2-3 times a week. I just try and fill out a page. I write it only in Portuguese. This has helped me tremendously because I have to stop every once in a while, think about a word. If I don't know the word, if I don't know how to express what I want to write, I need to stop and look it up. And over time, you will realize that you are stopping and researching what you want to express less and less until you can just write a full page in your journal in a foreign language. That's a really, really cool feeling. Highly recommend it. And that will directly translate to your conversational skills because you are expressing in your journal your desires, your challenges, your failures, your big successes, your feelings, your emotions. These are the things that are interesting to talk to about with other people. You don't want to only focus on learning how to express basic actions or day-to-day necessities in Portuguese because you want to be interesting. You want to take this opportunity and redefine yourself and be able to have a more advanced conversation about what's going on in your life because that's what's interesting to people and that's what you want to know about other people. So again, the last one is the journal. Highly recommend it. With these 5 strategies, again, tutor, change your map app in your phone, podcast in the car when you're driving, tandem, and keep a journal. And if you do all these things, or you do some of them, and you practice for, I would say, an hour a day, you will be conversational in Portuguese in less than a year if you are dedicated. In 2 years or less, you will be, depends on what your definition of fluent is, it will be night and day difference. You will be able to understand the majority of people, what they're saying. You will be able to express yourself, have interesting conversations, and when you go to Brazil, you will be much, much more confident. So I'm right at 2 years now. I went to Brazil 3 times last year. The first time I was out of my league again, and I had been studying for 9 months. The next 2 trips, I spent a lot of time basically just talking only in Portuguese. And every trip you go, your level of confidence is going to increase. So that's my recommendations on the 5 tips that you guys can use that I highly recommend. That's how I learned how to speak Portuguese, and so I know it works. And I wish the best for you. Hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more Portuguese content.